6 months of perfect avoidance, shattered in an underground parking garage. Evan Cross thought he could hide forever from the woman whose sister died in his arms. But when CEO Vivian Hale corners him between concrete pillars and cold fluorescent light, demanding to know why her best analyst won't look her in the eye, the truth explodes. He was there that night. He held her sister's hand as the life drained out. And seeing Vivian's face every single day feels like dying all over again. Stay until the end to see how a tragedy becomes something else entirely. Like this video and comment, what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The parking garage smelled like exhaust and old rain. Evan Cross kept his head down, keys already in his hand, moving fast toward his beat-up Civic in spot B47. It was 6:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, which meant he had exactly 13 minutes before Lila's after-school program closed, and they started charging late fees he couldn't afford. He'd gotten good at timing his exits. Most people left the building between 5 and 6. By 6:45, the executive floor was empty, the lobby quiet, the parking garage a concrete tomb. For 6 months, this had worked. 6 months of arriving early, leaving late, taking stairs instead of elevators, eating lunch at his desk, and never, absolutely never, being in the same room with Vivian Hale, unless at least 12 other people were present. His hand was on the car door when he heard the footsteps. Not the distant echo of someone 3 levels up, close, deliberate, coming from the direction of the executive elevator. Evan's chest tightened. He didn't turn around. Maybe if he just got in the car fast enough. Stop! The voice wasn't loud. Didn't need to be. Vivian Hale didn't raise her voice to make people listen. She just spoke, and the air rearranged itself around her words. Evan stopped. His hand stayed on the door handle, knuckles white. Turn around, Mr. Cross. He didn't move. Evan. Something in the way she said his first name, not angry, not cold, just tired, made him turn. Slowly. Vivian stood 15 feet away, still in her work clothes. Charcoal suit, white shirt, heels that made her almost as tall as him. Her dark hair was pulled back the way it always was, severe and exact. She looked like what she was, a woman who'd built a logistics empire from her father's failing trucking company and turned it into something worth $900 million. She also looked exhausted. 6 months, Vivian said. You've worked for me for 6 months. You're the best systems analyst I've ever hired. Your logistics algorithm saved us $4 million in the first quarter alone. Harrison in operations calls you a fucking wizard, and in 6 months, you have never once looked me in the eye. Evan stared at the concrete between them. I look at you in meetings. You look at my shoulder, or the wall behind me, or your laptop screen. She took 3 steps closer. I'm not stupid, Evan, and I'm tired of pretending I don't notice. His throat felt like sandpaper. I do my job. You do. Brilliantly, from a distance. Another step. But here's what I can't figure out. You're not intimidated by me. I've seen you tear apart VP-level strategy proposals in conference rooms without breaking a sweat. You don't flinch when I walk in. You just disappear. Like I'm something you can't stand to be near. Evan's hand dropped from the car door. His pulse hammered in his ears. That's not... So I'm going to ask you directly. Vivian stopped 10 feet away, arms crossed. What did I do to you? Nothing. Then what is it? I can't... He dragged a hand through his hair, turned halfway back to his car. I need to pick up my daughter. Answer the question first. Ms. Hale, what is it about me that makes you run? The words came out harder than before. Not a CEO asking an employee. A person demanding truth from another person. Evan's hands curled into fists at his sides. 6 months of careful distance, of calculated exits and strategic absences, all coming apart because she wouldn't let it go. He could feel the pressure building in his chest, the thing he'd been holding back since the day HR called to tell him he'd been hired. It's not you, he said quietly. Then what? It's... His voice cracked. He swallowed hard, forced the words out. It's your face. Silence. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Vivian's expression didn't change. Explain. Evan closed his eyes, opened them, looked at her directly for the first time in 6 months. You look like her, he said. Your sister, Maya. The name hung in the cold air between them. Vivian went very still. How do you know my sister's name? Because I was there. The words came out flat, dead. 4 years ago, April 14th, Route 92, mile marker 18. Single vehicle collision, drunk driver, head-on impact with a guardrail. He recited it like a report, the only way he could say it without falling apart. I was first on scene. Volunteer fire department. I was the one who... He stopped. Couldn't finish. Vivian's face had gone white. You're lying. I'm not. Prove it. Evan reached into his wallet with shaking hands, pulled out a small worn card. His old volunteer firefighter ID from Millbrook Station. He held it out. Vivian crossed the space between them in 4 sharp steps, grabbed the card, stared at it. Her breathing had gone shallow. You, she whispered. You were... I held her hand. Evan's voice broke completely now. For 23 minutes, until the ambulance came. And I see her every time I look at you. The same eyes, same cheekbones, same... He turned away, pressed his palms against the roof of his car. I can't do this. What did she say? Ms. Hale, what did my sister say to you? Evan's shoulders shook. She asked me to stay, so I did. I stayed until... He couldn't breathe. I'm sorry, I can't... I have to go. He yanked the car door open. Evan, wait. But he was already inside, engine starting, backing out too fast. Vivian stepped aside, still holding his ID card, and watched him drive away. Evan made it 3 blocks before he had to pull over. He sat in a grocery store parking lot, hands locked on the steering wheel, trying to remember how to breathe. 4 years. He'd gone 4 years without talking about that night. 4 years of therapy appointments he couldn't afford, and nightmares that still woke him up at 3 a.m. 4 years of telling himself he was fine. He'd moved on. It was just part of the job. And then Vivian Hale's company had called with a job offer he couldn't refuse. Benefits, real salary, stability for Lila. And he thought maybe he could do it. Maya and Vivian had different last names. He hadn't made the connection until his first day, when he walked into the office and saw her standing in the lobby. The same face, older, sharper, alive, but the same. He'd almost quit that day. Would have, except Lila needed braces and his landlord had just raised the rent and the signing bonus had already cleared. So he'd stayed and built walls and counted the minutes until he could leave each day without seeing her. His phone buzzed, the after-school program. He was late. Evan wiped his face, put the car in drive, and went to get his daughter. Lila was 8 years old and had exactly 0 patience for bullshit. You're 12 minutes late, she said, climbing into the back seat. Ms. Rodriguez said if it happens again, we get a written warning. I know. I'm sorry. You look weird. Are you sick? No. Did something happen at work? Evan pulled out of the parking lot, keeping his eyes on the road. Just a long day. Lila studied him in the rear view mirror with the kind of intensity that always made him nervous. She'd been doing that since she was 3. Looking at people like she could see straight through whatever they were pretending. You're lying, she said. I'm not. Your voice goes flat when you lie, like a robot. Eat your snack. She pulled a package of crackers from her backpack, but didn't stop watching him. Is it the lady boss? The one you won't talk about? Evan's hands tightened on the wheel. I talk about her. No, you say my boss or the CEO, but you never say her name. And you get tense when I ask about work. Lila bit into a cracker. Sarah's mom says women bosses are mean. Is yours mean? No. The word came out too sharp. He softened his voice. No, she's not mean. She's good at her job. Fair, smart. Then why don't you like her? I never said I don't like her. You don't have to. I can tell. Evan signaled, turned onto their street. Their apartment building was a faded yellow complex with a broken fountain out front. Not great, but safe, clean, affordable. That was all that mattered. He parked in their assigned spot, killed the engine, turned to look at Lila properly. Sometimes, he said carefully, people remind us of things that are hard to think about. That doesn't mean the person is bad. It just means it's complicated. Lila frowned. Does she remind you of Mom? No. That one was easy, at least. Lila's mother had walked out when she was 6 months old. Evan barely remembered her face. Nothing like that. Then what? Someone else. From before you were born. Someone who died? Evan's breath caught. Why would you think that? Because you get the same look when you talk about Grandpa Jim, like something hurts but you can't say where. 8 years old. She was 8 years old and she saw everything. Evan unbuckled his seatbelt, turned to face her fully. Yeah, someone who died. I was trying to help them, and I couldn't, and my boss looks a lot like that person, so sometimes it's hard. Lila considered this. Is that why you leave work early and come home looking sad? I don't, Dad. He stopped, nodded. Yeah, that's why. That's dumb. Lila, it's not her fault she looks like someone else, and it's not your fault you couldn't help them. That's what you told me when I couldn't help Casey pass his math test and he had to repeat 3rd grade. Evan felt something crack in his chest. That's different. No, it's not. Lila gathered her backpack, opened the car door. You should just tell her. Then maybe it wouldn't be weird anymore. She climbed out and headed for the building entrance, ponytail swinging. Evan sat in the car for another minute, watching her go. You should just tell her. He'd just done that. And it had gone about as badly as he'd feared. His phone buzzed again. Email notification. He glanced at the screen, expecting a late-night request from operations or a system alert. It was from Vivian Hale. Subject, tomorrow. Message, my office, 8 a.m. We're not finished. Evan stared at the screen until it went dark. So, he didn't sleep. At 3 a.m., he gave up trying and went to the kitchen, made coffee, sat at their small table, and watched the streetlights through the window. The apartment was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and Lila's soft breathing from the bedroom. He'd always been good in a crisis. That's what made him a decent first responder back in Millbrook. Keep moving. Follow protocol. Don't think, just act. But the aftermath, that's where he fell apart. When the sirens went quiet and the scene cleared and he had to go home and pretend he was fine, Maya Hale had been 26 years old, graduate student, coming home from a late library session. The drunk driver had crossed the center line doing 70 in a 45 zone, no headlights, no brake marks. By the time Evan arrived, first on scene, always first because he lived closest to that stretch of road, the other driver was already gone. Fled on foot. Left Maya trapped in a crushed vehicle with a steering column through her chest. She'd been conscious when Evan reached her. That was the part that still woke him up at night. She'd been conscious, talking, asking him if she was going to be okay. And he'd lied. Told her help was coming, told her to stay calm, told her everything would be fine. Held her hand and kept lying until her eyes went unfocused and her breathing stopped. They caught the driver 3 days later. DUI, vehicular manslaughter. He got 8 years, served 4. Evan had quit the volunteer department a month after the funeral. Moved to the city, started over. Built a new life where no one knew him as the guy who was there that night. And then Vivian Hale had hired him. The coffee had gone cold in his hands. Evan poured it down the sink, checked the time. 5:30 a.m. Close enough. He showered, dressed, left a note for Lila, drove to work in the dark. Vivian's office was on the top floor, corner suite with windows overlooking the city. Evan had been inside exactly twice. Once during his interview, once to deliver a quarterly report Harrison was too sick to present. Both times, he'd kept his eyes on the floor. This time, when her assistant waved him through at 8:02 a.m., Evan walked in and looked directly at her. Vivian sat behind her desk, hands folded on the polished surface. She'd traded yesterday's suit for a different one, navy instead of charcoal. But she wore the same expression. Unreadable. Sit, she said. Evan sat. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Through the windows behind Vivian, the city stretched out in steel and glass, morning sun cutting through the haze. I didn't know who you were when I hired you, Vivian said finally. That's what you're thinking, isn't it? That I tracked you down, that this was some kind of test or punishment. Evan said nothing. I'm telling you I didn't. Your resume came through standard channels. HR flagged you because of your systems work at Corbin Freight. I approved the hire because you were qualified. She paused. I didn't make the connection until 3 weeks in. You mentioned Millbrook in a meeting, former volunteer firefighter, and I thought, her voice went flat. I thought maybe. Why didn't you say anything? Because I wasn't sure. And because Vivian looked away, out the window. Because if it was you, I didn't know what I'd do. If I'd scream at you or thank you or both. Evan's throat felt raw. You should have fired me. Why? Because this is... He gestured between them. This doesn't work. I can't focus when you're in the room. I can't breathe when I see you. Every day I come here, I see her dying all over again. Then why do you stay? The question landed like a punch. Evan stared at her. You're good at what you do, Vivian continued. You could work anywhere. Take your algorithm to any logistics company in the country and name your price. So why are you still here, Evan? He didn't have a good answer, or maybe he did and couldn't say it. I need the benefits, he said finally. My daughter needs... Bullshit. Vivian's voice cut through his excuse like a blade. Harrison told me you turned down a headhunter offer last month. 30% salary increase, full benefits, sign-on bonus. You didn't even call them back. Evan's jaw clenched. That's none of your business. You made it my business when you spent 6 months treating me like a ghost. I wasn't... Yes, you were. Vivian stood up, moved to the window. You think I didn't notice? You think I don't see the way you schedule meetings to avoid me? The way you take the stairs when I'm near the elevator? You've perfected the art of being professionally invisible, Evan. And I let you do it because I thought... She stopped. I thought maybe you needed space. Time. But it's been 6 months and you're still running. I'm not running. Then look at me and tell me what my sister said. The room went silent. Evan stood slowly, hands shaking. You don't want to know. I've wanted to know for 4 years. Vivian turned to face him. The police report said she was conscious when you arrived, that you stayed with her, but it didn't say what happened, what she said. If she... Her voice cracked. If she was afraid. Evan felt his carefully constructed walls start to crumble. Ms. Hale, tell me. The words exploded out of him before he could stop them. She asked if she was going to die, and I told her no. I told her to hold on, that help was coming, that she'd be okay. I lied to her face because that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to keep them calm, keep them fighting. But I could see... His voice broke. I could see the steering column, the blood. There was so much blood, and I knew she wasn't going to make it, but I kept lying, kept telling her to stay awake. And she looked at me and said, Gee, he stopped, couldn't go on. What? Vivian's eyes were wet now. What did she say? She said, don't leave me alone. Evan's face was wet too. He didn't bother wiping it. So I didn't. I held her hand and I stayed until she stopped breathing. And I have replayed those 23 minutes every single day for 4 years, wondering what I could have done differently. What I should have said. If there was any possible way I could have saved her. The silence that followed felt like drowning. Vivian crossed the space between them, stopped inches away. Her hand came up slowly, hesitantly, and pressed against his chest, right over his heart. She wasn't alone, Vivian whispered. That's what you did. You stayed, and that's... Her voice shattered completely. That's all I wanted to know, that she wasn't alone. Evan stood frozen, barely breathing, as Vivian Hale, CEO, strategist, woman who'd built an empire, broke down in front of him. And for the first time in 6 months, he stopped running. They didn't go back to work that day. Vivian canceled her morning meetings. Evan sent a message to Harrison saying he was handling something urgent. They sat in her office, in the chairs by the window, and talked. Really talked. Not CEO and analyst. Not strangers avoiding each other, just 2 people who'd both lost someone on the same night. Vivian told him about Maya, the little sister who'd been brilliant and reckless and kind, who'd chosen graduate school over law school because she wanted to teach, not make money. Who'd called Vivian every Sunday without fail, even when they fought. Who'd been driving home that night because Vivian had asked her to pick up files from their father's old office, files that could have waited until morning. Evan told her about the guilt, the nightmares, The panic attacks that hit him in grocery stores when he smelled antiseptic or heard sirens. The way he'd quit the fire department because he couldn't trust himself anymore. Couldn't separate protocol from trauma. I thought seeing you every day would kill me, he admitted. But I also thought maybe I deserved it. Like penance? That's stupid, Vivian said. So my daughter tells me. That surprised a small, broken laugh out of her. You have a daughter? Lila. She's 8. Way too smart for her own good. Evan pulled out his phone, showed Vivian a picture. Lila grinning at the camera, gap-toothed and fearless. She looks like you. Poor kid. I meant the smart eyes. Vivian studied the photo. Does she know about Maya? Not the details, just that I used to be a first responder and saw some hard things. Evan pocketed his phone. I don't want her growing up thinking the world is that dark. But it is. Sometimes, but it's also got kids like her in it, so maybe it balances out. Vivian looked at him for a long moment. I hired you because you were good at your job, but I kept you because… She stopped. Because when I looked at your file, at your work, I saw someone who gave a damn. Someone who built things instead of breaking them. And I thought, if this is the person who was with Maya, then maybe she was okay. Maybe she had someone decent with her. Evan didn't know what to say to that. I'm not asking you to stop seeing her when you look at me, Vivian continued. I can't control that. But I am asking you to stop treating me like I'm going to shatter if you get too close. I spent 4 years wondering if my sister died afraid and alone. Now I know she didn't. That's… She swallowed hard. That's enough. What does that mean for… Evan gestured vaguely. This… work. It means we figure it out. You stop hiding. I stop pretending I don't notice. We do our jobs. Vivian's voice steadied. Unless you want to leave, I'll write you a reference that'll get you hired anywhere in the industry. No questions asked. Evan thought about Lila's words in the car. You should just tell her. Then maybe it wouldn't be weird anymore. I don't want to leave, he said. Then don't. It wasn't a solution, wasn't closure, but it was something. Maybe that was enough for now. When Evan finally left Vivian's office at noon, he felt hollowed out and strangely lighter, like he'd been carrying a weight he'd forgotten was there until someone helped him set it down. Harrison caught him in the hallway. You look like hell. Thanks. Everything okay? Vivian's been canceling meetings all morning. Evan paused. In 6 months, he'd never told Harrison the truth. Never told anyone at the company. But standing there, fresh from the most honest conversation he'd had in years, the secret felt pointless. We had some personal stuff to work out, he said. It's handled. Harrison raised an eyebrow. Personal stuff? With the Ice Queen? Don't call her that. Whoa. Harrison put his hands up. Defensive much? She's not cold, she's just… Evan stopped. She's dealing with a lot. Aren't we all? Harrison clapped him on the shoulder. Anyway, glad you're still alive. I need your help with the routing algorithm. Third quarter projections are a disaster. Send me the data. I'll look at it this afternoon. Evan went back to his desk, opened his laptop, and dove into work. For the first time in 6 months, he didn't count the minutes until he could leave. That night, Lila asked him about work again. They were eating dinner, boxed mac and cheese with cut-up hot dogs because Evan's cooking skills topped out at boiling water, when she said, You look different. Different how? Less robot. She twirled noodles on her fork. Did you talk to the lady boss? Evan set down his fork. Yeah, I did. And? And it was hard, but good, I think. Lila considered this. Did you tell her what you told me about the person who died? Yeah. What'd she say? Evan thought about Vivian's hand on his chest, the weight of her grief pressed against his. She said, thank you for staying. That's good. Lila went back to her mac and cheese. See? Not so scary. When did you get so wise? I've always been wise. You just don't listen. Evan smiled, actually smiled. Fair enough. They finished dinner, did dishes together, watched a nature documentary about wolves. At bedtime, Lila hugged him extra tight. I'm proud of you, she said. For what? For being brave. Evan held his daughter close and let himself believe her. The next morning, Evan walked into the office and took the elevator instead of the stairs. When the doors opened on the executive floor, Vivian was standing there with coffee in hand, clearly on her way down. They both froze. "Morning," Evan said. "Morning." Vivian stepped aside to let him exit, then paused. "Your algorithm, the one you've been building for the Western routes. I want you to present it at the board meeting next month." Evan blinked. "The board meeting? Yes, they need to see what we're investing in. And I think you're the right person to show them." It was an opportunity, a massive one, the kind that could change his career trajectory completely. It was also terrifying. "I'll do it," Evan said. Vivian nodded. "Good. We'll prep next week." She stepped into the elevator. As the doors started to close, she looked at him one more time. "For what it's worth," she said, "I'm glad you stayed." The doors closed before he could respond. Evan stood in the hallway, heart racing, and realized something. He was glad, too. Over the next 2 weeks, something shifted. Evan stopped leaving early, started eating lunch in the break room instead of at his desk, joined the Friday afternoon operations meeting he'd been avoiding for months. Vivian was there, always there, but instead of triggering panic, her presence became manageable, familiar. They still didn't talk much outside of work topics, but when they did, it wasn't painful anymore. Harrison noticed. "You and the boss finally sort out whatever was going on?" Something like that. "Good, because the company gossip mill was getting weird ideas." Evan snorted. "About what?" "You know, secret affair, corporate espionage. One person swore you were her long-lost brother." Harrison grinned. "Personally, I went with Evan accidentally insulted her shoes and has been terrified ever since. Her shoes are fine. See, I knew it, but the gossip didn't bother Evan. Let them speculate. The truth was stranger and more painful and belonged to him and Vivian alone. The algorithm presentation consumed his focus. He refined the routing logic, built visualization tools, stress-tested the projections. Vivian reviewed his work with the kind of sharp attention that would have intimidated him 6 months ago. Now it just made him sharper. "This section," she said during one prep session, tapping his screen, "you're burying the cost savings. Lead with that. The board doesn't care about elegant code. They care about money." "It's not just about money." "I know, but they don't. So show them the money first, then the innovation." Evan reworked the slides. She was right. She was usually right. "You're good at this," he said without thinking. Vivian looked up. "At what?" "Seeing what matters, cutting through the noise." She studied him for a moment. "My father used to say the only thing that matters in business is whether people trust you to deliver. Everything else is decoration." A pause. He wasn't great at much, but he was right about that. It was the first time she'd mentioned her father. Evan remembered the detail from Maya's obituary, survived by Father Robert Hale and Sister Vivian, but nothing more. "Is he dead? Heart attack 2 years ago." Vivian's tone was matter of fact. "Right after I took over the company, probably rolling in his grave watching a woman run his legacy." "You've tripled revenue." "He'd say I got lucky." "Then he was an idiot." The words came out before Evan could stop them. Vivian's eyebrows shot up. "Sorry," Evan muttered. "That was accurate." Vivian smiled, actually smiled. "He was an idiot, brilliant at logistics, terrible at people. Maya got all the emotional intelligence in the family." They worked in silence for a while after that. Comfortable silence, the kind that didn't need filling. The board presentation happened on a Thursday. Evan wore his one good suit, bought for job interviews, rarely used since, and arrived at the office an hour early to run through his slides one last time. His hands shook slightly as he set up the projector. 8 board members, all older, wealthier, infinitely more powerful than him. And Vivian, sitting at the head of the table, watching everything. No pressure. "You'll be fine," she told him that morning. "Just don't mumble." "I don't mumble." "You do when you're nervous. Chin up. Project. They're just people. Rich people. People who could kill his career with a bad word." But when the meeting started and Evan began presenting, something clicked. The algorithm was good. The data was solid. And he knew this material better than anyone in the room. He led with the cost savings, $4 million in Q1, projected $12 million annually, then walked them through the innovation, showed them how the system learned from driver behavior, weather patterns, traffic data, how it could adapt in real time to disruptions, how it made their competition's logistics look like they were using paper maps and prayer. The board asked questions. Evan answered them, no mumbling, clear, direct, confident. When he finished, the chairman, a silver-haired man named Douglas, who'd been on the board since Vivian's father ran the company, leaned back in his chair. "Impressive," Douglas said. "Though I have to ask, Ms. Hale, why are we only seeing this now? This feels like technology we should have implemented 6 months ago." Vivian didn't hesitate. "Because Mr. Cross needed time to perfect it. I'd rather launch something that works than rush something half-finished and watch it fail." "And you're confident this will scale?" "I am." Douglas looked at Evan. "You built this alone?" "With input from operations," Evan said. "But the core system, yes." "Remarkable." Douglas glanced at the other board members. "I move we approve full implementation. All in favor?" 7 hands went up. 1 abstention, a woman named Patricia who never voted yes on the first pass for anything. "Motion carries," Douglas said. "Good work, Mr. Cross." Evan nodded, collected his materials, left the room on legs that felt like water. He made it to the bathroom before the adrenaline crash hit. Vivian found him 10 minutes later, sitting on the floor outside the conference room. "You okay?" "Yeah, just needed a minute." She sat down next to him, on the floor, in a designer suit, like it was the most normal thing in the world. "You killed it in there," she said. "I was terrified." "Couldn't tell." They sat in silence. Down the hall, the board members filtered out, talking amongst themselves. "Thank you," Evan said quietly, "for giving me this shot." "You earned it." "Still, you didn't have to put me in front of them." Vivian turned to look at him. "Yes, I did. Because you're brilliant and you were wasting it hiding behind Harrison's shadow. And because," she paused, "because I think Maya would have liked you. She always said the best people were the ones who gave a damn, even when it cost them something." Evan's throat tightened. "You don't know that." "No, but I'm choosing to believe it anyway." They sat there a while longer, 2 people who'd found their way out of the dark by accident, side by side in a corporate hallway. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't closure, but it was something. And for now, that was enough. The implementation rollout started the following Monday, and with it came a workload that made Evan's previous 60-hour weeks look like vacation. He was at his desk by 7 most mornings, building out the driver interface while operations hammered him with questions. The system had to integrate with existing dispatch software, communicate with GPS units in 200 trucks, and do it all without disrupting daily operations. One mistake could cost the company millions and strand shipments across 3 states. "How's it going?" Harrison dropped into the chair next to Evan's desk, holding 2 cups of coffee. He slid one across. "Ask me when I've slept." "That bad?" "I've got drivers in Sacramento threatening to quit because they think the algorithm is spying on them. Dispatch in Portland says the route suggestions are ignoring weight restrictions. And someone in accounting wants to know why we're burning through server costs faster than projected." Evan took a long drink of coffee. It was terrible. He drank more anyway. "Other than that, perfect." Harrison winced. "Need help?" "Unless you can explain to a 50-year-old trucker why an algorithm knows his route better than he does. Not really." "I'll pass." Harrison leaned back. "For what it's worth, Vivian's impressed. She told Douglas you were handling the chaos better than most people twice your age." Evan looked up sharply. "She said that?" "Yeah, in the exec meeting yesterday. Douglas wanted to know if we should bring in outside consultants. She shut him down hard, said you had it under control." Something warm settled in Evan's chest. Not pride, exactly. More like relief that someone believed in him when he wasn't sure he believed in himself. "She's probably regretting that now," Evan muttered, turning back to his screen. "I just got an email from the union rep asking if we're trying to automate drivers out of jobs." "Are we?" "No. The system optimizes routes. It doesn't replace people." Evan rubbed his eyes. "But try explaining that to someone who's been driving the same route for 20 years, and suddenly a computer is telling them to take a different exit. You'll figure it out. You always do." Harrison left. Evan stayed at his desk until the office emptied, then stayed longer. At 9 p.m., his phone buzzed. Lila, texting from her friend Emma's house where she was sleeping over. Dad, are you still at work? Yeah. Big project. You're going to turn into a robot for real. I'll be home tomorrow. Promise. Okay, love you. Love you too. Evan set the phone down, stared at the spreadsheet in front of him, and admitted what he'd been avoiding all week. He was in over his head. The technology worked fine, but managing the human side, the fear, the resistance, the politics, that was something he'd never learned how to do. He needed help, and there was only one person in the building who dealt with this exact problem before. Evan grabbed his laptop and headed for the executive floor. Vivian's office light was still on. He knocked, heard her voice call, "It's open?" She sat behind her desk, reading something on her tablet, still in work clothes even though it was past 9. When she saw Evan, her eyebrows rose. "You look like you're about to quit." "I'm about to ask for help, which feels worse." Vivian set the tablet down. "Sit. Talk." Evan sat. For a minute, he didn't say anything, just tried to organize the mess in his head into something coherent. Finally, he gave up and just said it. "I don't know how to do this. The tech side, fine. I can code in my sleep. But the people side, getting buy-in, managing resistance, convincing a bunch of skeptical drivers that I'm not trying to screw them over. I have no idea what I'm doing." Vivian listened without interrupting. When he finished, she stood up, moved to the small conference table by the window, and gestured for him to join her. "Tell me the biggest complaint you're getting," she said. "That the system doesn't understand real-world conditions, traffic, weather, road closures. They think it's just spitting out theoretical routes that'll fall apart the second they hit the road." "And does it?" "No, it pulls real-time data from 6 different sources. It's more accurate than human memory." Evan caught himself getting defensive, forced his voice level. "But they don't trust it. And I don't know how to make them trust it without it sounding like I'm calling them stupid." Vivian nodded slowly. "When my father died and I took over, half the senior staff quit within 3 months. They didn't think a 32-year-old woman could run a logistics company. Didn't matter that I had an MBA and had been working here since I was 20. They saw me and decided I'd fail." Evan waited. "So I stopped trying to convince them I was right," Vivian continued. "Instead, I asked them to prove me wrong. I told them to pick the route they thought I'd screw up, run it their way for a month, then run it my way for a month. Track every metric. If I was wrong, we'd go back to the old system and I'd publicly admit it." What happened? My way cut costs by 18% and reduced late deliveries by 30%. 3 drivers asked to be reassigned to routes using the new system. By the end of the quarter, the resistance evaporated. She met his eyes. "You can't logic people out of fear, Evan. You have to let them see the proof themselves." It was so simple it felt obvious. And yet Evan had spent 2 weeks trying to argue his case instead of just showing them. "Pick 3 routes," Vivian said. "High traffic, complex ones where the drivers have the most complaints. Run a pilot. Let them compare old versus new. Document everything. Then present the results to the whole driver pool and let the data speak." "That'll take time. So we'll fighting this battle every single day for the next 6 months." Vivian leaned back. "Trust me. Take the time now." Evan nodded, already running through which routes would work best. "Thank you."
도움,
"Don't thank me yet. You still have to convince the union rep to agree to a pilot. And Carl's not exactly a pushover." "Great. Welcome to management." Vivian's mouth quirked. "It's mostly just herding cats who think they know better than you." Evan surprised himself by laughing. Actual laughter, at 9:30 at night, in the middle of the most stressful project of his career. Vivian smiled. Not the professional smile she wore in meetings, something softer, real. "You should go home," she said. "Get some sleep. Fight with Carl tomorrow when you're not running on fumes." "What about you?" "I'll leave in a bit." She gestured at her tablet. "Just finishing quarterly projections." Evan stood, gathered his laptop. At the door, he paused. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Do you ever get tired of it? The constant fighting, proving yourself over and over?" Vivian considered the question. "Yes. But the alternative is letting people who don't give a damn make decisions that affect thousands of lives. So I keep fighting." She tilted her head. Why? Just wondering if it gets easier. It doesn't. You just get better at it. Not exactly comforting, but honest. Evan appreciated that. Good night, Ms. Hale. Vivian? He stopped. What? Call me Vivian. We're past Ms. Hale, don't you think? It felt like crossing a line. But maybe that line had already been crossed weeks ago, sitting on a hallway floor talking about dead sisters and impossible grief. Good night, Vivian. Good night, Evan. He left, and for the first time all week, the weight on his shoulders felt manageable. The meeting with Carl went better than expected, mostly because Evan led with, "I think you're right." Carl, a barrel-chested man in his 50s with a Union Local 447 jacket and a skeptical squint, had been prepared for a fight. Evan's agreement clearly threw him. "Right about what?" Carl said slowly. "That the drivers don't trust a system they can't see working. So let's show them." Evan laid out the pilot proposal. 3 routes, 1 month each. Full data transparency, driver's choice whether to participate. Carl read through the plan, lips pursed. "And if your algorithm screws up, then we scrap it and I go back to the drawing board." Just like that? Just like that. Evan met his eyes. "I'm not trying to replace drivers, Carl. I'm trying to make their jobs easier. But if the system doesn't do that, then it's useless. I want to know that as much as you do." Carl studied him for a long moment. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect? Some tech bro who thinks he's smarter than everyone else?" Carl folded the proposal, tucked it in his jacket. "All right, I'll bring it to the drivers. But I'm picking the routes, and if even one of them says the system made their day harder, we're done." "Fair enough." They shook hands. Carl's grip could crush stone. When Evan reported back to Vivian later that day, she actually looked surprised. "He agreed? Just like that? I think he was expecting me to be an asshole. When I wasn't, it confused him into cooperation." "That's called diplomacy, Evan. You might be good at this. Don't jinx it." The pilot launched the following week. Carl picked 3 of the worst routes in the system: Sacramento to Seattle, Portland to Boise, and a nightmare run through the Sierras that had a 40% late delivery rate. Evan spent the next month glued to real-time data, watching every mile, every delay, every decision the algorithm made. The drivers called him constantly. Questions, complaints, occasional compliments when the system routed them around a traffic jam they would have hit otherwise. Evan answered every call, adjusted the system when they had legitimate concerns, and slowly started to understand what Vivian had meant about herding cats. By the end of the month, the numbers were undeniable. Sacramento to Seattle cut fuel costs by 12% and reduced late deliveries to 0. Portland to Boise shaved an average of 40 minutes off drive time. The Sierra run, the one everyone said couldn't be fixed, hit 95% on-time delivery. Carl presented the results to the full driver pool himself. No editorializing, just raw data and 3 drivers talking about their experience. "I didn't think it would work," said Martinez, who'd driven the Sacramento route. "But it did. Saved me 3 hours of sitting in traffic last week alone." The room was quiet. Then someone raised their hand. "When can the rest of us get it?" Evan felt something in his chest unlock. Relief, vindication, proof that he hadn't been crazy to believe this could work. After the meeting, Carl pulled him aside. "Good work, kid. You kept your word. That matters." "Thank you. Don't let it go to your head. You've still got 200 more routes to roll out. One problem at a time." Carl clapped him on the shoulder hard enough to bruise. "You'll do all right." That night, Evan took Lila out for pizza to celebrate. Real pizza, from the good place downtown, not frozen from the grocery store. "You seem happy," Leela said, stealing a pepperoni from his slice. "I am. Work's going well?" "Is the lady boss still scary?" Evan paused mid-bite. "She's not scary. She's just intense." "That's the same thing." "No, it's not. Scary means you're afraid of someone. Intense means they care a lot about doing things right." Lila considered this. "Do you like her?" "As a boss?" "Yeah, she's good at what she does." "I meant as a person." Evan set down his pizza. "Why are you asking?" "Because you talk about her different now, like she's a real person instead of just my boss." Lila tilted her head. "And you smile when you say her name." "I do not." "You just did." Evan opened his mouth to argue, realized she was right, and closed it again. When had that happened? When had Vivian stopped being the woman he couldn't look at and started being someone whose opinion he valued? Someone he respected? Someone he... He cut the thought off. This was dangerous territory. She's been helpful with the project, he said carefully. That's all. Okay. Lila went back to her pizza, but Evan could see the smile she was hiding. The full system rollout took another 6 weeks. By the end of October, every route in the company was running on Evan's algorithm. Driver complaints had dropped by 70%, and the third quarter earnings report showed the biggest profit margin in company history. Douglas called Evan directly to congratulate him. Vivian said you were worth the investment. She wasn't wrong. Thank you, sir. Have you thought about what's next? A system like this has applications beyond our company. We could license it, build a whole new revenue stream. Evan hadn't thought about that. He'd been so focused on making the current system work that he hadn't considered what came after. I'll put together some ideas, he said. Do that. And Evan, keep up the good work. We need more people like you around here. When the call ended, Evan sat at his desk feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Momentum. Like his life was finally moving forward instead of just treading water. His phone buzzed. Text from Vivian. Drinks tonight, celebrate the win. My treat. Evan stared at the message. It was professional. Collegial. The kind of thing bosses did with employees who delivered major projects. It was also just the two of them. No Harrison, no operations team, no buffer. Sure. Where? Morton's. 7 p.m. Morton's. The steakhouse downtown where entrees cost more than Evan's weekly grocery budget. He didn't own clothes nice enough for Morton's. Sounds good. He'd figure it out. The restaurant was exactly as expensive as Evan had feared. Dark wood, low lighting, waiters in suits who looked at him like they could smell the Target clearance rack on his one decent button-down shirt. Vivian was already there, sitting at a corner booth, still in work clothes but with her hair down for once. It changed her whole face, made her look younger, less untouchable. You're early, she said as he slid into the booth. Lila's at a friend's house. I had time. A waiter appeared, offered menus the size of newspapers. Evan opened his, saw the prices, and nearly choked. Order whatever you want, Vivian said, watching his reaction. Company card. You sure? You just saved us $12 million a year. I think we can afford a steak. Evan ordered something mid-range. Vivian ordered wine that probably cost more than his entree. When the waiter left, silence settled over the table. So, Vivian said, how does it feel? What? Success. You built something that worked, that matters. Not everyone gets to do that. Evan turned his water glass in slow circles. It feels good, scary. Like now I have to figure out what comes next. Douglas mentioned licensing. Yeah. What do you think? I think I'm a systems analyst, not a businessman. I wouldn't know where to start. Vivian leaned forward slightly. What if you didn't have to start alone? Evan looked up. What do you mean? I mean, we could build this into something bigger. Not just optimize our routes, but create a platform other companies could use. You handle the tech, I handle the business side. 50-50 partnership. The offer hung in the air between them, huge and terrifying and completely unexpected. You're serious, Evan said, completely. You're brilliant at what you do, Evan, but you're wasting that brilliance making incremental improvements to one company's logistics. Imagine what you could do with real resources, real scope. I have a daughter. I can't take risks like that. It's not a risk if it's backed by existing revenue. We'd keep your current salary, add profit sharing on top. You'd have more stability, not less. Evan's head spun. A week ago, he'd been drowning in implementation details. Now Vivian was offering him a partnership, equity, a future he hadn't imagined possible. Why me? He asked. Because you give a damn. Because you listen to the people doing the actual work instead of assuming you know better. Because... Vivian stopped, seemed to reconsider her words. Because I trust you. And trust is rare. Their food arrived. They ate in silence for a while, Evan turning the offer over in his mind. It made sense, strategically. The algorithm was proven, the market existed. But working that closely with Vivian, building something together, that felt like stepping off a cliff without knowing what was at the bottom. Can I think about it? He asked. Take all the time you need. Vivian cut into her steak. But for tonight, let's just enjoy the win. No business talk. Deal? Deal. They talked about other things. Lila's school, Vivian's ongoing war with the board over expansion plans, the documentary about wolves Evan had watched. Normal conversation. Easy. The kind Evan hadn't had with another adult in longer than he could remember. At some point, Vivian laughed at something he said, real laughter, not the polite kind, and Evan realized he was in trouble. Because Lila had been right. He did smile when he said Vivian's name. And he was smiling now, sitting across from a woman who 3 months ago he couldn't stand to be near, feeling something shift inside him that had nothing to do with business partnerships or algorithms. He was starting to care. About her. As a person, not just a boss or a connection to a tragedy. That was dangerous. You got quiet, Vivian said. Just thinking. About the partnership? About a lot of things. She studied him across the table. You do that. Think too much. Occupational hazard. Sometimes you have to trust your gut. My gut's gotten me in trouble before. So has overthinking. Vivian finished her wine. But I'm not going to push. You'll decide when you decide. The check came. Vivian paid without looking at the total. They walked out into the cool October night, the city lit up around them. Thank you, Evan said. For dinner and the offer. I mean it. You earned both. Vivian pulled her coat tighter. Can I ask you something personal? Sure. Are you happy? Not with work, with life, with where you are. The question caught him off guard. Evan thought about his small apartment, his limited budget, the constant juggling of Lila's needs and his own exhaustion. But he also thought about Lila's laugh, the pride in her voice when she said she was proud of him, the way his life had slowly started to feel less like survival and more like living. I'm getting there, he said honestly. Good, Vivian smiled. You deserve to be. They stood there a moment longer, breath fogging in the cold air, before Vivian raised her hand for a cab. Good night, Evan. Good night. He watched her drive away, then walked to his own car, mind churning. Partnership, trust, possibility, and underneath it all, the terrifying realization that he was starting to let someone in again, that he was starting to let Vivian matter. The letter arrived on a Thursday morning in mid-November, delivered by certified mail to Evan's apartment. He signed for it without thinking, assumed it was something about Lila's school or maybe a notice from the landlord about the heating system that never worked right. He opened it, standing in the kitchen, coffee going cold on the counter. The letterhead read, Mitchell and Warren, attorneys at law. Evan's stomach dropped before he even read the first line. Notice of civil claim. Derek Paul Hutchinson, plaintiff versus Evan Michael Cross, defendant regarding negligence and wrongful death. The words blurred. Evan had to read them 3 times before they made sense, and even then his brain refused to process what he was seeing. Derek Hutchinson. The drunk driver. The man who'd crossed the center line doing 70 with a blood alcohol level twice the legal limit. The man who'd killed Maya Hale and fled the scene on foot, leaving her to die. He was suing Evan for negligence. The claim alleged that Evan, as a first responder on scene, had failed to provide adequate medical care, that he'd moved Maya when he shouldn't have, administered aid incorrectly, and that his actions, not the collision itself, had caused her death. It demanded compensation for emotional distress, reputational damage, and legal fees from the criminal case. Evan read it twice more, hands shaking so hard the paper rattled. This couldn't be real. It had to be some kind of mistake, a clerical error, a piece of mail meant for someone else. But his name was right there in black ink, along with his address, his former fire department affiliation, and a court date set for January. He barely made it to the bathroom before he threw up. When the worst of it passed, Evan sat on the cold tile floor, back against the tub, staring at nothing. 4 years. He'd survived 4 years of guilt and nightmares and the slow, grinding work of learning to function again. And now the man who'd caused all of it was coming after him, trying to destroy what little stability Evan had managed to build. His phone buzzed. Lila's school. He ignored it, buzzed again. Work. He turned the phone face down and closed his eyes. He had no idea how long he sat there. Could have been minutes, could have been an hour. Eventually, his phone rang loud enough that he had to answer or throw it against the wall. What? His voice came out raw. Evan? It's Harrison. You missed the morning briefing. Everything okay? No? Silence on the other end. Then, carefully, do you need me to call someone? I need... Evan stopped. What did he need? A lawyer he couldn't afford? Time he didn't have? A way to make this nightmare go away? I need to go. He hung up before Harrison could respond. The rest of the day passed in fragments, picking up Lila from school on autopilot, making dinner he didn't eat, helping with homework while his brain screamed static. Lila asked him twice if he was okay. He said yes. She didn't believe him, but didn't push. At midnight, still awake, Evan finally did what he'd been avoiding. He called the number at the bottom of the legal notice. A voicemail system answered. Professional, cold, offering office hours and case numbers. Evan hung up without leaving a message. He couldn't do this alone. But he also couldn't drag anyone else into this mess. It was his problem, his past, his phone rang. Unknown number. Evan almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Mr. Cross. A woman's voice, crisp, efficient. This is Jennifer Wade from Mitchell and Warren. I'm calling regarding the civil claim filed by Mr. Hutchinson. It's midnight, Evan said. I'm aware I'm calling from the West Coast. I wanted to reach out before this went any further. A pause. Mr. Cross, I'm going to be direct with you. This claim is legally questionable at best, but it's going to be expensive and time-consuming to fight, and my firm is counting on you not having the resources to do that. We're hoping you'll settle quickly to make it go away. Evan's grip on the phone tightened. Are you seriously calling me at midnight to tell me to roll over? I'm calling to tell you that I think this case is garbage, but my job is to represent my client regardless of my personal opinion. And off the record? You should get a lawyer, a good one, because Derek Hutchinson is betting you won't, and he'll win by default if you don't show up prepared. Why are you telling me this? Because I looked up the incident report. I know what happened that night. And I know that you're not the person who should be on trial here. Her voice softened slightly. Get a lawyer, Mr. Cross. Fight this. Don't let him win. The line went dead. Evan sat in the dark living room, phone still pressed to his ear, trying to understand what had just happened. A lawyer for the other side had called to tell him to fight back, which meant either she was setting him up for something worse, or the case really was as flimsy as she'd implied. Either way, she was right about one thing. He needed help. The next morning, Evan called in sick to work for the first time in 6 months. He spent 3 hours on the phone with legal aid services, only to be told they didn't handle civil cases like this. He tried 2 private attorneys whose names he found online. One quoted him $20,000 just for a retainer. The other said they didn't take cases against personal injury firms because they were too messy. By noon, Evan was sitting in his car outside Lila's school, head on the steering wheel, completely out of options. His phone rang. Vivian. He stared at her name on the screen. She'd notice eventually that he wasn't at work, that something was wrong. Better to answer now and lie than dodge calls all day. Hey, he said, trying to sound normal. Where are you? Home. Not feeling great. You sound like hell. Thanks. Evan? Vivian's voice shifted. Not boss mode, something gentler. What's going on? Nothing, just a bug. I'll be back Monday. Don't lie to me. You've worked through 2 colds and a stomach flu since I've known you. You don't call in sick for nothing. Evan closed his eyes. He could hang up, make an excuse, keep this contained the way he'd kept everything else contained for the past 4 years. Or he could tell the truth and let someone help him. The decision made itself. I'm being sued, he said quietly, by the drunk driver, from the accident. The silence on the other end lasted so long, Evan thought the call had dropped. Where are you? Vivian asked finally. My car, outside Lila's school. Stay there. I'm coming to you. You don't have to. Evan, stay there. She hung up. Vivian arrived 20 minutes later in a black sedan that probably cost more than Evan made in a year. She climbed into his passenger seat without asking, took one look at him, and said, Show me the letter. He handed it over, watched her read it, watched her face go from confused to furious in the span of 30 seconds. This is insane, she said. Yeah. He's claiming you caused her death? When he's the one who was driving drunk? Vivian's voice was sharp enough to cut glass. This is This is grotesque. His lawyer called me last night, told me to get a lawyer and fight it. His own lawyer? She said off the record she thinks the case is garbage, but that it'll be expensive to defend and they're counting on me not being able to afford it. Vivian read the letter again, slower this time. When she looked up, her expression was steel. How much do you have saved? That's not your... Evan, how much? About 3,000. Maybe. He swallowed. I've been trying to build up an emergency fund, but Lila needed new glasses and the car needed work, and 3,000 won't even cover initial filings. Vivian folded the letter carefully, handed it back. I'm getting you a lawyer. No? Yes. Vivian, I can't let you. You're not letting me do anything. I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do. Her voice was firm, final. That man killed my sister, and now he's trying to destroy the person who stayed with her when she was dying. I'm not letting that happen. Evan felt something crack in his chest. This isn't your fight. Like hell it isn't. Vivian pulled out her phone, started scrolling. I know someone. Best defense attorney in the state. He owes me a favor from when I helped him with a corporate case 3 years ago. I'm calling him now. Vivian. She was already dialing. The conversation lasted 5 minutes. Vivian explained the situation in clipped, efficient sentences, sent a photo of the legal notice, and nodded several times. When she hung up, she turned to Evan. His name is Marcus Chen. He'll take the case, pro bono, as a favor to me. You meet with him Monday morning at 9. Evan couldn't speak. His throat had closed completely. Thank you, he managed finally. Don't thank me yet. We still have to fight this thing. Vivian's expression softened slightly. But you're not doing it alone. Understand? Evan nodded, didn't trust himself to say anything else. They sat in silence for a while, watching parents pick up their kids from school. Lila would be out soon. Evan needed to pull himself together before she saw him like this. Can I ask you something? Vivian said quietly. Sure. Why didn't you call me first when you got the letter? Evan stared out the windshield. Because this is my problem, my past. I didn't want to drag you into it. You didn't drag me into anything. I'm already in it. I've been in it since the night Maya died. She turned to face him. You don't have to carry everything alone, Evan. That's not strength. That's just stubbornness. Feels like the same thing sometimes. It's not. Lila emerged from the school building, backpack bouncing, talking to a friend. She spotted Evan's car and waved. Then she saw Vivian in the passenger seat and her eyes went wide. Is that her? Lila mouthed through the window. The lady boss? Evan nodded. Lila grinned, gave him an exaggerated thumbs up, and skipped over. When she opened the back door and saw Vivian up close for the first time, she froze. Oh, hi. Hi, Vivian said. You must be Lila. I'm Vivian. I know, my dad talks about you. Lila climbed in, buckled up, eyes never leaving Vivian. Are you guys dating? Evan choked. Lila, what? I'm just asking. We work together, Vivian said smoothly, but there was amusement in her voice. Your dad's very good at his job. He's good at a lot of things, except cooking. He's terrible at cooking. Lila. What? It's true. She leaned forward between the seats. Do you like kids? I don't know many, Vivian admitted, but the ones I've met have been interesting. That's a weird answer. Lila, that's enough. But Vivian laughed. Actually laughed. She's right. It was a weird answer. She looked at Lila. Yes, I like kids, especially ones who ask direct questions. Good, because my dad needs more people in his life who aren't boring. Lila sat back, satisfied. Can we get ice cream? It's November, Evan said. So? Ice cream doesn't have a season. Vivian glanced at Evan. She makes a compelling argument. You're not helping. Fine, ice cream, but just this once. They ended up at a place near the apartment, sitting in a booth while Lila demolished a sundae the size of her head. Vivian ordered coffee. Evan ordered nothing, still too nauseous to think about food. Lila talked non-stop, asking Vivian questions about work and the city and whether she'd ever been on a boat. Vivian answered each one patiently, and somewhere in the middle of the conversation, Evan realized this was the first time in years he'd seen someone outside of school interact with his daughter like she was a real person, not just a kid to be tolerated. Your dad says you're smart, Vivian said at one point. I am. I'm in the advanced reading group. What are you reading? The Giver. It's about a world where everything's controlled and no one has choices. It's kind of depressing, but also really good. Sounds familiar, Vivian said dryly. Lila grinned. Do you like your job? Most days. What about the other days? I remind myself why I'm doing it. Why are you doing it? Vivian paused, considering the question seriously. Because someone has to, and I'm good at it, and because the people who work for me deserve someone who won't screw them over for profit. Lila nodded like this made perfect sense. My dad says you're the smartest person he's ever worked for. Evan's face went hot. I did not say that. You said she's sharp and doesn't miss anything. That's the same thing. Vivian's mouth quirked. Did he? Can we talk about literally anything else? Evan muttered. Nope. Lila scraped the last of her ice cream from the bowl. I like her. Can she come over for dinner sometime? Lila, I'd like that, Vivian said. Evan looked at her sharply. She met his eyes, steady and certain. If your dad's okay with it, she added. Lila turned to Evan with an expression of pure hope. Please? He was being ambushed by his 8-year-old daughter and his boss. In an ice cream shop on a Thursday afternoon while his life was falling apart. Sure, he heard himself say. Sometime. Lila cheered. Vivian smiled. And Evan wondered when exactly he'd lost control of his entire existence. Marcus Chen's office was downtown in a glass tower that made Evan feel immediately out of place. The lobby had marble floors and art that probably cost more than his car. The receptionist offered him coffee in a real mug, not a paper cup. Evan sat in the waiting area, leg bouncing, until a door opened and a man in his 40s appeared. Asian, sharp suit, carrying a tablet and the letter from Hutchinson's lawyers. Mr. Cross? Marcus Chen? Come on back. The office was all windows and clean lines. Marcus gestured to a chair, sat across from Evan, and didn't waste time. I've reviewed the claim. It's offensive legally and morally, but that doesn't mean it's not dangerous. Walk me through what happened that night. Everything you remember. Evan had told this story exactly twice. Once to the police 4 years ago. Once to Vivian in the parking garage. Each time had taken pieces out of him. He told it again now. The call, the drive, the scene. Maya's injuries. What he did and didn't do. What she said. How long he stayed. Marcus listened without interrupting, taking notes on his tablet. When Evan finished, Marcus leaned back. Did you move her from the vehicle? No, she was pinned. I couldn't have moved her if I wanted to. Did you perform CPR? She was breathing, conscious. CPR wasn't indicated. Did you have medical training? Basic first responder, EMT certification, but it had lapsed by then. I kept up the skills on my own. Marcus nodded. Here's what they're going to argue, that you should have done more, applied pressure differently, called for advanced life support sooner, something, anything to shift blame away from their client. Can they do that? They can try, but the incident report is clear. You followed protocol. The coroner's report states cause of death is massive internal trauma from the collision, not from any action or inaction by responders. And Marcus pulled up something on his tablet. Derek Hutchinson's own testimony from the criminal trial states that he fled the scene immediately, which means he has no direct knowledge of what you did or didn't do. He's making this up based on conjecture. So why file the claim? Because it costs him nothing and might get him something. Either you settle out of fear, or he drags you through enough hell that you give up. It's a shakedown. Marcus set the tablet down. But here's the good news. I think we can get this dismissed before it even goes to trial. The claim is frivolous, no legal standing. A judge will see that. And if they don't, then we fight it in court. But I don't think it'll come to that. Evan wanted to believe him, wanted to think this would all go away quickly and cleanly. But the knot in his stomach wouldn't loosen. What do I need to do? For now? Nothing. I'll file a motion to dismiss. We'll have a hearing in about 6 weeks. You'll need to be there, but I'll handle the heavy lifting. Marcus stood, extended his hand. Try not to worry. I know that's easier said than done, but you've got a strong case. We'll get through this. Evan shook his hand, thanked him, and left. He made it to his car before the shaking started. 6 weeks. 6 weeks of waiting while his past tried to tear apart his present. 6 weeks of wondering if this would cost him his job, his credibility, his ability to provide for Lila. He texted Vivian. Met with Marcus. He thinks we can get it dismissed. Her response came immediately. Good. Breathe. You're going to be fine. Evan wanted to believe that too. The next 6 weeks were some of the longest of Evan's life. He went to work, did his job, smiled when people asked how he was doing. At night, he lay awake running through worst-case scenarios until exhaustion dragged him under. Lila noticed? Of course she noticed. She started leaving him drawings on the kitchen table before school, stick figures of the two of them holding hands with the sun overhead, notes that said, "You're the best dad," in crayon. She didn't ask what was wrong, but she made sure he knew she was there. Vivian noticed too. She started scheduling their check-ins over lunch instead of in her office. Casual conversations about work that always ended with her asking if he was okay. Evan always said yes. She always looked like she didn't believe him but didn't push. 3 weeks before the hearing, Harrison cornered him in the break room. All right, what's going on? Nothing. You've been weird for weeks. Jumpy. Distracted. You nearly bit my head off yesterday when I asked about the Portland routes. I apologized for that. I know, which is why I know something's wrong. Harrison crossed his arms. Come on. We've worked together for 8 months. You can tell me. Evan stared into his coffee. Legal stuff, from before I worked here. It's complicated. Can I help? Not unless you're secretly a lawyer. Damn. I'm just a glorified spreadsheet monkey. Harrison's expression softened. But seriously, if you need anything, time off, someone to cover meetings, whatever, just ask. Thanks. And Evan, whatever it is, you'll get through it. You're tougher than you think. Evan wished that were true. 2 weeks before the hearing, Vivian showed up at his apartment unannounced on a Saturday morning. She was carrying a bag of bagels and 2 coffees. Lila opened the door, still in pajamas, and her face lit up. Vivian! Dad! Vivian's here! Evan appeared from the kitchen, dish rag in hand, completely unprepared. What are you? I brought breakfast, and I thought Lila might want to go to the Science Museum today. If that's okay with you. Vivian looked at Lila. They have a new exhibit on space. Lots of hands-on stuff. Lila grabbed Evan's arm. Can we, please? Evan looked at Vivian. She met his eyes steadily, and he understood. She was giving him something normal, something good. A break from the constant wait. Yeah, he said. Let's go. They spent the day at the museum. Lila ran from exhibit to exhibit, dragging both of them along, asking questions faster than either could answer. Vivian kept up effortlessly, engaging with Lila like she'd known her for years instead of weeks. At one point, while Lila was absorbed in building a model rocket, Vivian turned to Evan. She's amazing. I know. You're doing a good job with her. I'm doing my best. That's not the same thing. It is, actually. Vivian watched Lila through the glass. My parents weren't around much when Maya and I were growing up. Dad was always working. Mom left when I was 12. Maya raised herself mostly, and me when I'd let her. She paused. I think about that sometimes. What it would have been like if we'd had someone who showed up, who tried. Evan didn't know what to say to that. You're a good father, Evan. Don't let whatever's happening make you forget that. Something in his chest loosened slightly. They got lunch in the museum cafe. Lila declared it the best day ever. On the drive home, she fell asleep in the back seat, head against the window. Thank you, Evan said quietly. For what? For today. For caring about her. Vivian glanced in the rear-view mirror at Lila's sleeping form. It's not hard. She's easy to care about. Still. They drove in comfortable silence until Vivian pulled up outside his apartment building. The hearing's in 2 weeks, Evan said. I know. Marcus says it'll probably be fine, but I keep thinking, what if it's not? What if this drags out? What if... Then we deal with it. Vivian's voice was firm. Whatever happens, you're not facing it alone. I meant that. Evan looked at her, really looked, saw the determination in her face, the steel underneath, saw someone who'd lost her sister and her father and still found the strength to keep building, keep fighting, keep showing up. Saw someone he trusted, maybe more than trusted. I don't know how to thank you, he said. You don't have to, just don't shut me out. She reached over, squeezed his hand briefly. Let me help, that's all I'm asking. Evan held on a moment longer than necessary before letting go. Okay, he said. I will. The week before the hearing, Lila got into a fight at school. Evan got the call during a meeting with operations. The vice principal's voice was carefully neutral, explaining that Lila had pushed another student during lunch and would need to be picked up immediately. When Evan asked if the other child was hurt, the vice principal said no, but that didn't change the fact that Lila had violated the school's zero-tolerance policy on physical aggression. Evan excused himself from the meeting, grabbed his keys, and drove to the school with his heart in his throat. Lila didn't push people. She used words, sometimes too many words, but never her hands. Something had to have happened. He found her sitting in the main office, arms crossed, jaw set in a way that reminded him uncomfortably of himself. Her eyes were red but dry. She'd been crying earlier but had stopped by the time he arrived. Hey, Evan said quietly, crouching in front of her chair. You okay? I'm fine. Want to tell me what happened? No. The vice principal, a tired-looking woman named Mrs. Patterson, gestured Evan into her office. Lila stayed in the waiting area, staring at the wall. Mr. Cross, I want to be clear that we take any physical altercation seriously, Mrs. Patterson said once they were seated. But I also want you to know the context. Another student made comments about Lila's family situation, specifically about her not having a mother. When Lila asked him to stop, he continued. She pushed him away from her table. Evan's hands curled into fists in his lap. What exactly did this kid say? According to witnesses, he said that single dads are too dumb to keep a wife, and that Lila's mother probably left because Lila was annoying. Mrs. Patterson's expression was careful. I've already spoken with the other student's parents. He's receiving consequences as well. But our policy requires a one-day suspension for physical contact, regardless of provocation. So she's being punished for defending herself. She's being held accountable for her choice to respond physically instead of seeking adult help. Evan wanted to argue, wanted to point out that expecting an 8-year-old to stay calm while being verbally attacked was unrealistic. But he also knew that fighting the school wouldn't help Lila. Fine, he said. One day. She'll serve it. I appreciate your understanding. For what it's worth, Mr. Cross, Lila's usually one of our best students. I don't think this represents a pattern, but given everything... Mrs. Patterson hesitated. Is everything all right at home? The question landed like a gut punch. Everything's fine. Because if there are stressors affecting her behavior, we have counselors available. We're fine, thank you. Evan stood before she could push further, collected Lila from the waiting area. They walked to the car in silence. Once they were both inside, doors closed, Evan turned to face her. You want to talk about it? Lila stared straight ahead. He's a jerk. Yeah, he is. But you can't push people, Lila. You know that. He wouldn't stop. I asked him 3 times to leave me alone, and he kept saying things about you, about us. Her voice cracked. He said you're probably a bad dad because Mom left. Evan felt something fracture in his chest. Lila, and I know that's not true. I know you're a good dad, but everyone was listening, and I wanted him to shut up. Tears were falling now, fast and angry. I'm sorry. I know I shouldn't have pushed him, but I'm not sorry I made him stop. Evan unbuckled his seatbelt, reached over, and pulled his daughter into an awkward hug across the center console. She buried her face in his shoulder and cried hard, the kind of crying that shook her whole body. You're allowed to be angry, Evan said quietly. When people say cruel things, you're allowed to feel however you feel. But we don't put our hands on people, even when they deserve it. You understand? Lila nodded against his shirt. And for the record, you're not annoying. You're brilliant and stubborn and sometimes too smart for your own good, but you're not annoying, and anyone who says otherwise is an idiot. That got a wet laugh out of her. You're not supposed to call people idiots. I'm a grown-up. I can break my own rules. They stayed like that until Lila's breathing evened out. Then Evan drove them home, called work to say he wouldn't be back, and spent the rest of the afternoon watching nature documentaries with his daughter, curled up next to him on the couch. Around 6, someone knocked on the door. Evan opened it to find Vivian standing there with takeout bags and a determined expression. I heard about the school thing, she said. Thought you might not feel like cooking. Evan stared at her. How did you? Harrison mentioned you left early for a family emergency. I put two and two together. Vivian held up the bags. Chinese food. I didn't know what Lila liked, so I got a little of everything. Lila appeared in the hallway. You brought food? I did. Is that okay? Yeah, Dad can't cook anyway. Lila, Evan warned. What? It's true. Vivian smiled. Then I timed this perfectly. They ate at the small kitchen table, containers spread between them. Lila was quieter than usual, picking at her lo mein, but she perked up when Vivian asked about the Science Museum exhibit they'd seen. The rocket I built is still there, Lila said. They have this whole wall where you can leave your designs. Mine's the red one near the top. That's impressive, Vivian said. Did your dad help? No. He tried, but he put the fins on backwards. Evan pointed his fork at her. The instructions were unclear. They had pictures. Confusing pictures. Vivian laughed, and the sound filled the small apartment in a way that made Evan's chest ache. This felt too domestic, too real, like they were something they weren't. After dinner, Lila excused herself to her room to read. Evan started cleaning up, and Vivian helped without being asked. She's going to be okay, Vivian said quietly, rinsing a plate. Kids are resilient. I know, I just hate that she had to deal with that. Evan scrubbed at a container harder than necessary. The worst part is that kid wasn't wrong. Her mom did leave, and sometimes I do wonder if I'm screwing this up. You're not. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Vivian set the plate in the drying rack, turned to face him. I've seen you with her, Evan. I've seen how she looks at you. That kid loves you completely, and you show up for her every single day, even when things are hard, especially when things are hard. That's not screwing up. That's doing it right. Evan's throat tightened. It doesn't always feel like it. It never does, but that doesn't make it less true. They finished the dishes in silence. When the kitchen was clean, Vivian grabbed her coat. I should go. Let you two have your evening. Evan walked her to the door. Thank you, for the food, for showing up. You'd do the same for me. Would I? I think so, yeah. Vivian pulled on her coat. The hearing's in 4 days. Are you ready? No, but I'll show up anyway. That's all you can do. She paused, hand on the doorknob. I'm coming with you, to the hearing, if that's okay. Evan's first instinct was to say no, that she didn't need to waste her time, that he could handle it. But the truth was, he didn't want to face it alone, and Vivian was offering something he'd been too proud to ask for. Yeah, he said. That's okay. More than okay. Good, I'll meet you there at 8:30. She left, and Evan stood in the doorway long after her car disappeared down the street. The night before the hearing, Evan didn't sleep at all. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, running through every possible outcome. Best case, the judge dismissed the claim immediately, and it was over. Worst case, he didn't want to think about worst case. At 5 a.m., he gave up on sleep and made coffee. Sat at the kitchen table reviewing the documents Marcus had sent over. Incident reports, witness statements, the coroner's findings. Everything painted a clear picture. Evan had done his job correctly. The claim was baseless, but knowing that didn't stop the fear. Lila found him at 6, already dressed for school, and climbed into the chair next to him. Big day? She asked. Yeah. Are you scared? Evan thought about lying, decided against it. A little. That's okay. Being scared doesn't mean you're weak. It means you care about what happens. He looked at his daughter, 8 years old and already wiser than him. Where'd you learn that? Miss Rodriguez. She says fear is just your brain trying to protect you, but you're stronger than your brain thinks. Miss Rodriguez sounds smart. She is. Lila leaned against his arm. You're going to be okay, Dad. I know you are. How do you know? Because you always are. Even when things are hard, you figure it out. She squeezed his hand. And because Vivian's going with you, she won't let anything bad happen. It's not her job to protect me. Maybe not, but she's going to anyway, because she cares about you. Lila looked up at him. Do you care about her? The question hung in the air between them. Evan knew the answer, had known it for weeks, maybe longer, but saying it out loud felt like jumping off something high without knowing what was at the bottom. Yeah, he said finally. I do. Good, because I like her, and I think she likes us too. Lila,
I know. It's complicated. Adults always say things are complicated when they're actually pretty simple. She hopped down from the chair. I need to finish my homework before school. You need to eat something. You look gray. She disappeared into her room, leaving Evan alone with his coffee and the strange, terrifying realization that his daughter was right. About all of it. The courthouse was downtown, a concrete building that looked like it had been designed to intimidate. Evan arrived at 8:15 wearing the same suit he'd worn to the board presentation. Marcus was already there, talking on his phone, briefcase at his feet. When Marcus saw Evan, he ended the call and walked over. Morning, you ready? As ready as I'm going to be. Good. We're in courtroom 3. Judge Morrison. She's fair but no nonsense. She won't tolerate any theatrics from Hutchinson's team. Marcus glanced past Evan. Is someone meeting you here? Yeah, she should be. I'm here. Vivian appeared, dressed in a sharp gray suit, heels clicking on the marble floor. She looked like she belonged in a courtroom, like she'd faced down worse things than this, and won. Marcus extended his hand. Ms. Hale, good to see you again. Marcus, thanks for taking this case. Thanks for the referral on the Brennan merger. We're even. Marcus checked his watch. We've got 10 minutes. Let's go over the plan one more time. They found a bench in the hallway. Marcus walked Evan through what would happen. Opening statements, presentation of the claim, Evan's opportunity to respond. Marcus expected Hutchinson's lawyer to argue that Evan had a duty of care and failed to meet it. Marcus would counter with the incident report, expert analysis, and the simple fact that Evan had done everything correctly. They're going to try to make you emotional, Marcus warned. Talk about how tragic the death was, imply that someone has to be held accountable. Don't take the bait. Stay calm. Answer questions directly. Don't elaborate unless I tell you to. Evan nodded, mouth dry. And remember, this is just a motion hearing. We're not litigating the full case today, just arguing whether the case has merit to proceed. The bar is low, but I think we can clear it. At 8:30, they were called into the courtroom. The space was smaller than Evan had imagined. Wood paneling, fluorescent lights, rows of benches mostly empty except for a few people waiting for other cases. Judge Morrison sat at the bench, a black woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and an expression that suggested she'd heard every lie in existence and wasn't interested in hearing more. Hutchinson sat at the plaintiff's table with his lawyer, a man named Mitchell who looked expensive. Hutchinson himself was thin, mid-40s, with the kind of face that would be forgettable if you hadn't seen it in a mugshot. He didn't look at Evan, just stared straight ahead, jaw tight. Evan took his seat next to Marcus. Vivian sat in the gallery directly behind them. Judge Morrison reviewed the file, then looked up. This is a motion to dismiss filed by the defendant in the matter of Hutchinson versus Cross. Mr. Mitchell, you have 10 minutes to argue why this case should proceed. Mitchell stood. Thank you, Your Honor. My client, Mr. Hutchinson, has suffered immeasurable harm as a result of the events of April 14th, 4 years ago. While he acknowledges his role in the accident itself, subsequent investigation has revealed that the responding first responder, Mr. Cross, failed to provide adequate care to the victim, Maya Hale. Medical experts consulted by my client have indicated that different interventions might have saved Ms. Hale's life. Mr. Cross's failure to— What interventions? Judge Morrison interrupted. Mitchell blinked. I'm sorry? You said different interventions might have saved the victim. What intervention specifically? Advanced airway management, aggressive hemorrhage control, immediate extrication. Was Mr. Cross trained in advanced airway management? He was a certified first responder. Basic certification or advanced? Mitchell hesitated. Basic, Your Honor, but— And was he equipped with the tools necessary for what you're describing? Intubation equipment, surgical instruments for hemorrhage control? The fire department should have provided— Mr. Mitchell, I'm asking what Mr. Cross personally had access to at the scene, not what might theoretically have been available. Mitchell shuffled his papers. The incident report indicates he had a basic first aid kit, which would include what? Bandages, gloves, basic supplies? Yes, Your Honor. So you're arguing that Mr. Cross, with basic training and basic equipment, should have performed advanced medical procedures that even paramedics would struggle with in field conditions? Mitchell's jaw tightened. I'm arguing that he had a duty to do more than he did. What did he do?
According to his own statement, he stayed with the victim and provided comfort until emergency services arrived. And that's inadequate because she died, Your Honor. Someone has to be held accountable. The courtroom went silent. Judge Morrison leaned forward. Mr. Mitchell, let me be very clear. Tragic outcomes do not automatically equal negligence. If they did, every doctor who lost a patient and every first responder who arrived at a fatal scene would be liable for wrongful death. That's not how the law works. Your Honor, we believe that Mr. Cross's actions directly contributed based on what evidence? Expert testimony? Medical records showing a different outcome was possible? We intend to develop that evidence during discovery. So you're asking this court to let you proceed to discovery in hopes of finding evidence to support a claim you don't currently have evidence for? Mitchell's face flushed. We have a good faith belief that evidence exists. Based on? Based on the fact that a young woman died when she might have been saved. Judge Morrison sat back. Mr. Chen, your response? Marcus stood. Your Honor, the plaintiff's argument rests entirely on speculation. The incident report is clear. Mr. Cross arrived on scene, assessed the victim's condition, provided appropriate care given his training and available resources, and stayed with her until emergency medical services arrived. The coroner's report, which I've submitted as Exhibit A, states unequivocally that cause of death was massive internal trauma from the collision itself. No intervention by a basic first responder would have changed that outcome. Uman, does the plaintiff dispute the coroner's findings? Mitchell stood. We believe a second opinion. That's not what I asked. Do you have evidence that disputes the official cause of death? Not at this time, Your Honor, but then you're asking me to allow a case to proceed based on your belief that you might find evidence later that could possibly contradict the official record, even though you currently have no such evidence and no expert willing to testify to it. Is that correct? Your Honor, with respect, Mr. Mitchell, answer the question, yes or no? Mitchell's shoulders sagged. Yes, Your Honor. Judge Morrison looked at the file again, then at Hutchinson. Mr. Hutchinson, do you have anything you'd like to say? Hutchinson stood slowly. I just think someone should be held responsible. That girl died and nobody paid for it except me. I went to prison. I lost everything. And the person who was supposed to save her just gets to walk away like it never happened? Evan's hands clenched under the table. Marcus put a hand on his arm. A warning. Mr. Hutchinson, Judge Morrison said, her voice quiet but firm. I understand that you've suffered consequences for your actions. That's the criminal justice system working as intended. But you don't get to transfer your guilt onto someone else because you're unhappy with your punishment. Mr. Cross didn't cause this tragedy. You did. And attempting to sue him for negligence when the evidence shows he did everything correctly is not seeking justice. It's seeking a scapegoat. Your Honor, Mitchell tried to interject. I'm not finished. Judge Morrison looked at Evan. Mr. Cross, you were a volunteer first responder? Evan stood. Yes, ma'am. How long did you serve? 6 years. And you responded to that scene as part of your volunteer duties? Yes, ma'am. I was off duty, but I lived closest to that stretch of road. I was usually first on scene for that area. Did you receive compensation for your service? No, ma'am. It was volunteer. Judge Morrison nodded. Thank you. You may sit. She looked at her notes one more time, then delivered her ruling. This claim is dismissed with prejudice. The plaintiff has failed to demonstrate any legal basis for liability. Mr. Cross acted within the scope of his training and duties. The tragic outcome does not constitute negligence. Mr. Hutchinson, you may not refile this claim or any substantially similar claim against Mr. Cross. This matter is closed. She banged her gavel. It was over. Evan sat frozen, unable to process what had just happened. Around him, people were moving. Mitchell gathering his papers, face tight with anger. Hutchinson staring at the table, hands clenched. Marcus packing up his briefcase, looking satisfied. Evan, Vivian's hand on his shoulder. It's done. You won. He turned to look at her. It's really over? It's really over. Something broke open in his chest. Relief. Disbelief. The slow, dawning realization that the nightmare was finally finished. Marcus shook his hand. Good work staying calm in there. You did great. I didn't do anything. You did all of it. I presented the facts. But you're the one who had the facts to present. You did your job right 4 years ago, Evan. Today just made it official. They walked out of the courtroom together. In the hallway, Evan leaned against the wall, legs suddenly weak. You okay? Vivian asked. I don't know. I think so. Maybe. He laughed, slightly manic. I think I need to sit down. She guided him to a bench, sat next to him. They didn't talk, just sat there while the adrenaline drained away and reality settled back in. Thank you, Evan said finally, for being here, for making this possible. You would have found a way without me, maybe, but it would have been a lot harder. He turned to face her. I mean it, Vivian. You didn't have to do any of this, but you did, and I... He stopped, searching for words that felt adequate and finding none. Thank you. Vivian's expression softened. You held my sister's hand when she was dying. You stayed with her so she wasn't alone. That's not something I can repay, Evan. But helping you with this, it's the least I could do. It's not the least. It's everything. They sat in silence a while longer. Then Vivian's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, sighed. I have a board call in 20 minutes. I need to get back to the office. Yeah, of course. She stood, hesitated. Are you going to be okay? I think so. I need to call Lila. Let her know it's over. Tell her I said hi. I will. Vivian started to leave, then turned back. Evan? Yeah? That partnership offer. It's still on the table. If you want it. Evan looked at her standing there in the courthouse hallway. This woman who'd faced down her own grief to help him fight his, and realized he'd already made his decision. Maybe he'd made it weeks ago, sitting on a hallway floor at work. Or maybe at dinner in her apartment when Lila had declared her the best person ever. Or maybe just now, watching her defend him without hesitation. I want it, he said. I'm in. Vivian smiled, actually smiled, bright and genuine. Good, we'll celebrate later. Dinner, my place. Bring Lila. She'll hold you to that. I'm counting on it. She left, and Evan sat on the bench a while longer, letting the weight of the past 4 years finally lift. Then he called his daughter. Hey, kiddo. Dad, how'd it go? Are you okay? It's over. The case is dismissed. It's done. Lila's squeal of joy was loud enough that Evan had to hold the phone away from his ear. I knew it. I knew you'd win. We won. We all did. Is Vivian still there? She just left. She says hi. Tell her I say hi back, and tell her you're taking her to dinner to celebrate. Evan laughed. She already invited us to her place. Even better. Can I pick the movie we watch after? This isn't a sleepover, Lila. Yet. Lila, I'm just saying, you like her, she likes you. This is how it starts. Evan closed his eyes. You're 8, and I'm smart. You said so yourself. She paused. I'm proud of you, Dad, for fighting, for not giving up. His throat closed. Love you, kid. Love you too. Now go celebrate. You deserve it. She hung up. Evan sat there holding his phone, thinking about partnerships and possibilities, and the strange way life sometimes gave you exactly what you needed when you'd stopped expecting it. Then he got up and went back to work, lighter than he'd been in years. The dinner at Vivian's apartment happened 3 days later, on a Friday evening when the city was settling into weekend mode and Evan's nervous system had finally stopped treating every phone call like an incoming threat. Vivian lived in a converted loft in the warehouse district, all exposed brick and high ceilings and windows that overlooked the river. Lila's eyes went wide the moment they stepped inside. This is where you live? She breathed. It's like a museum. It's just an apartment, Vivian said, but she looked pleased. Come on. I ordered Thai food. Hope that's okay. I love Thai food, Lila said immediately, even though Evan was 90% sure she'd never had it. They ate at Vivian's dining table, which was made of reclaimed wood and probably cost more than Evan's car. The food was good, the conversation easy. Lila asked Vivian about the art on her walls, the books on her shelves, whether she'd ever been to space. Space? No, why would I go to space? Because you're rich, and rich people do weird stuff. Evan nearly choked on his pad thai. Lila, what? They do. Emma's dad bought a vintage car he can't even drive because it's too old for normal roads. Vivian laughed. Fair point. But no, I haven't been to space.
I did go to Iceland once, saw the northern lights. Were they green? Green and purple, like someone spilled paint across the sky. Layla's expression went dreamy. I want to see that someday. Maybe you will. After dinner, Lila sprawled on Vivian's couch with a book she'd brought, giving the adults space without being asked. Evan helped Vivian clean up in the kitchen, and the domesticity of it felt surreal. Loading a dishwasher with someone who wasn't Lila, talking about nothing important while city lights glittered through the windows. She's wonderful, Vivian said quietly, rinsing a plate. You know that, right? I do. Doesn't stop me from worrying I'm screwing it up. You're not. Vivian dried her hands, leaned against the counter. Can I ask you something? Sure. What happened with her mother? You don't have to tell me if it's too personal, but Lila mentioned once that she doesn't remember her. Evan set down the glass he was washing. There's not much to tell. We weren't together long. A few months. She got pregnant, decided to keep the baby, and I said I'd help however she needed. We tried making it work after Lila was born, but it was obvious we didn't belong together. She left when Lila was 6 months old, signed over full custody. I haven't heard from her since. Does Lila ask about her? Not really. She did when she was younger, but I think she made peace with it. Her reality is what it is. She's got me, and for now, that's enough. For now? Evan glanced toward the living room where Lila was absorbed in her book. She's 8. That'll change as she gets older. She'll want answers I can't give her. She'll wonder why her mom didn't want to stay. And I won't be able to fix that for her. You can't fix everything, Evan. Sometimes being there is enough. Is it, though? Because most days I feel like I'm barely holding it together. Like one wrong move and the whole thing falls apart. Vivian was quiet for a moment. Then she said, You want to know what I see when I look at you and Lila together? What? I see a kid who knows she's loved, who trusts you completely, who isn't afraid to be herself because she knows you'll catch her if she falls. Vivian met his eyes. That's not barely holding it together, Evan. That's doing it right. Something in his chest loosened. You really think so? I know so. They finished the dishes in comfortable silence. When they returned to the living room, Lila had abandoned her book and was standing at the windows looking out at the city. It's so pretty from up here, she said without turning around. Like all the lights are stars that fell down. Vivian stood next to her. I like that. Stars that fell down. Do you ever get lonely living by yourself in such a big place? The question was pure Lila, direct, unflinching. Evan opened his mouth to tell her that was too personal, but Vivian answered before he could. Sometimes, she said honestly, but I'm used to it. I've lived alone for a long time. You don't have to, though. You could have people over more, like us. Lila, Evan started. I'd like that, Vivian said. Having you over more. Lila turned to look at her. Really? Really? Good, Lila grinned. Because I think my dad likes you, like really likes you, and I like you too. So it would be weird if we didn't come over more. Evan's face went hot. Lila, we talked about this. You said not to push. I'm not pushing. I'm just stating facts. She looked between them. You guys are terrible at this, by the way. Adults always make things so complicated. Vivian's mouth twitched. Complicated how? You like each other. It's obvious, but you keep pretending it's just work stuff or friend stuff when it's clearly more than that. Lila crossed her arms. I'm 8, and I can see it. So either you're both really bad at hiding it, or you think I'm dumb. Which is it? Evan wanted the floor to open up and swallow him. Lila, that's enough. Is she wrong? Vivian asked quietly. Evan looked at her. She was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Open. Vulnerable. Waiting. No, he said. She's not wrong. Lila pumped her fist. I knew it. But that doesn't mean... Evan stopped, trying to find words that wouldn't sound like excuses. It's complicated, Lila. Vivian and I have history, and she's my boss, and there's a lot of things that... Are you making excuses because you're scared, or because you actually don't want this? Lila's tone was gentle, but firm. Because if you don't want it, that's fine. But if you're just scared, that's different. Out of the mouths of children. Evan looked at Vivian, who was still waiting, still open. I'm scared, he admitted, of screwing this up, of it being too complicated, of, he swallowed hard, of losing someone again. Vivian crossed the room, stood in front of him. I'm scared too. I haven't let anyone close in years, not since Maya died. It's easier to just work, build things, stay in control. She glanced at Lila, then back at Evan. But I'm tired of easy. And I'm tired of being alone, and voice wavered slightly. I like you, Evan. A lot. And I like Lila. And maybe it's complicated, but maybe that's okay. Lila looked at her father. Are you going to say something or just stand there looking like a robot? Evan laughed. It came out shaky but real. I like you too, a lot. I have for a while. I just didn't know if I felt the same way. Vivian smiled. I do, for the record. Good, Lila nodded approvingly. Now, can we watch a movie? Because this emotional stuff is exhausting and I want popcorn.
They ended up watching some animated film about dragons that Lila had seen 3 times already. She sat between them on the couch, running commentary through the whole thing, while Evan and Vivian exchanged glances over her head that felt like promises neither of them knew how to voice yet. Halfway through the movie, Lila fell asleep, head on Vivian's shoulder. Vivian froze, uncertain. Is this okay? She whispered.
Yeah. Evan's throat felt tight. She doesn't do that with people she doesn't trust. What do I do? Just let her sleep. She'll wake up when the movie ends. But Lila didn't wake up. By the time the credits rolled, she was completely out. Evan carefully lifted her, and Vivian walked them to the door. Thank you, Evan said quietly, for tonight, for everything. Thank you for trusting me with all of this. I want to do this right, whatever this is. I don't want to rush it or mess it up. We won't rush it. We'll figure it out as we go. Vivian touched his arm lightly. That's all anyone can do. Evan shifted Lila's weight, leaned down, and kissed Vivian. Brief, soft, a beginning. When he pulled back, she was smiling. That was nice. Yeah, it was. Do it again sometime? Definitely. He carried Lila down to the car, got her buckled in. As he pulled away from the curb, he glanced up at Vivian's building. She was standing in the window, watching them leave. He waved. She waved back. And Evan drove home feeling like maybe, finally, things were starting to go right. The partnership paperwork took 6 weeks to finalize. Lawyers, contracts, equity splits, operational structures. Evan attended meetings with people whose job titles he barely understood, nodding along while Vivian translated corporate speak into language that made sense. Harrison was thrilled. You're basically a co-owner now. That's insane. It's 20% equity. Vivian's keeping majority control. Still, that's more than most people get in a lifetime. Harrison grinned. You deserve it, man. You built something real. The official announcement went out in February. Vivian sent a company-wide email introducing Evan as Director of Technology and Innovation with equity partnership in the new logistics platform division they were spinning off. The response was overwhelmingly positive. Carl called to congratulate him. Douglas sent a bottle of scotch that probably cost more than Evan's monthly rent. But the best part was telling Lila. Does this mean you're rich now? She asked over dinner that night. Not rich, but more stable. We'll be okay. Can we get a dog? Lila, I'm just asking. We have more money. Dogs cost money. It's logical. We'll talk about it. She beamed like she'd already won. The weeks that followed were a blur of work and planning and slowly learning how to build something with another person. Evan and Vivian met twice a week to strategize, pushing each other's ideas until they found solutions neither could have reached alone. They argued about features, debated pricing models, and discovered they worked together better than either had expected. They also started dating, officially, which was strange and wonderful and occasionally awkward because they still worked together and couldn't quite figure out how to separate professional from personal. We need boundaries, Vivian said one night over dinner at a small Italian place downtown. Work stays at work. When we're here, we're just us. Agreed. No talking about routes or algorithms or board meetings. Deal. They lasted about 10 minutes before Evan mentioned a problem with the driver interface and Vivian started sketching solutions on a napkin. We're terrible at this, Evan said. The worst, Vivian kept sketching. But I don't hate it.
Me neither. Lila loved having Vivian around. They did Sunday brunches, trips to museums, movie nights where Lila picked films that made both adults question her taste. Vivian learned that Lila loved science but hated math, that she was allergic to strawberries, that she had nightmares sometimes about being forgotten. What do you do when that happens? Vivian asked Evan one night after Lila had gone to bed. I sit with her, remind her she's not alone. Sometimes we make hot chocolate and watch documentaries until she falls back asleep. You're a good father. I'm trying to be. You are. Don't doubt that. In March, Evan moved them to a better apartment. 2 bedrooms, actual heat, a dishwasher that worked. Lila got her own bathroom and declared it the best day of her life. Vivian helped them move, showing up in jeans and an old shirt, carrying boxes without complaint.
You didn't have to do this, Evan said as they assembled Lila's new bed frame. I wanted to. This is what people do. They help each other. Vivian tightened a bolt. Besides, someone has to make sure you don't put this together backwards. That was one time with the bookshelf. It fell over twice. The instructions were bad. She laughed, and Evan realized he'd memorized that sound, the way it started quiet and built, the way it made her whole face change. That night, after Lila was asleep in her new room, Evan and Vivian sat on the floor of the living room surrounded by half-unpacked boxes. This is good, Vivian said quietly. What we're building, all of it. Yeah, it is. I'm happy. I don't think I've been able to say that in years, but I'm happy. Evan took her hand. Me too. They sat there in the quiet, and Evan thought about how far he'd come from that night in the parking garage, how he'd gone from avoiding Vivian to building a life with her, how grief and guilt had somehow transformed into this. Can I tell you something? Vivian said. Anything. I think Maya would have liked you. I think she would have liked this. Us. Evan's throat tightened. You think so? I know so. She always said the best people were the ones who showed up even when it was hard, who kept trying even when everything was broken. Vivian squeezed his hand. That's you. That's what you do. I don't always feel like I'm doing it right. Nobody does. But you do it anyway. That's what matters. They stayed up late that night talking, planning, dreaming about what came next. When Vivian finally left, Evan stood in the doorway of Lila's room watching her sleep. His daughter. His reason for everything. We're okay, he whispered to the dark. We're going to be okay. The platform launched in May to immediate success. 3 companies signed licensing agreements in the first month. By June, they had a waiting list. Evan hired a small team to help with development, and suddenly he wasn't just an analyst anymore. He was leading people, building something that mattered. The work was intense, but fulfilling. He came home tired, but satisfied. And every evening he had Lila's chaos to come home to, and twice a week he had dinner with Vivian. And on weekends they did things together as a strange little unit that didn't quite have a name yet, but felt right anyway. In July, Lila's school held a father-daughter event. Evan had always gone alone before, watching other kids with both parents and telling himself it didn't matter. But this year, when they arrived, Vivian was waiting in the parking lot. What are you doing here? Evan asked. Lila invited me, said you might need backup. Vivian looked uncertain. If that's okay? I know this is your thing. It's more than okay. Evan looked at Lila, who was grinning like she'd won the lottery. Did you plan this? Maybe. Is it working? Yeah, kid, it's working. They spent the afternoon doing terrible crafts and eating mediocre pizza, and when Lila's friend Emma asked if Vivian was her mom, Lila said no, but she might be someday. And Evan saw Vivian's eyes go bright with something that looked like hope. That night, after they dropped Lila at a sleepover, Evan and Vivian went back to her place. They'd been taking things slow, careful not to rush, but something had shifted. Some unspoken agreement that they were ready for more. I love you, Evan said as they stood in her kitchen. I should have said it sooner, but I was scared. I'm still scared, but I love you. Vivian crossed the space between them, wrapped her arms around him. I love you too. I think I have for a while. I just didn't know how to say it. We're both terrible at this. The worst. They kissed, and it felt like coming home. Later, lying in Vivian's bed with city lights painting patterns on the ceiling, Evan thought about how strange life was.
How you could lose everything and somehow find something better in the wreckage. How the worst night of his life had led eventually to this. "What are you thinking about?" Vivian asked, head on his chest. "That I didn't think I'd get here. A year ago, I was just trying to survive each day. And now," he gestured at the room, at them. "This feels like someone else's life." "It's yours. You earned it." "We earned it. Fair." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I want you to move in. You and Lila. I know it's fast and we can wait if you need to, but this apartment is too big for one person and too quiet, and I want you here. Both of you." Evan's heart kicked hard against his ribs. "Are you sure?" "Completely. Unless you're not." "I'm sure. We're sure. He laughed, slightly stunned. "I didn't expect this tonight. Life doesn't usually wait for us to expect things." Vivian propped herself up on one elbow. "But if it's too soon, we can wait. I'm not going anywhere." "It's not too soon. It's perfect." Evan pulled her back down. "Let's do it." They told Lila the next morning when Evan picked her up from the sleepover. Her reaction was to scream, jump up and down, and demand to know if she could paint her new room purple. "We'll talk about it," Vivian said. "That means yes. That means we'll talk about it." But it did mean yes. Because watching Lila's joy, seeing the family they were becoming, Evan couldn't imagine saying no to anything that made his daughter this happy. They moved in August. It was chaotic and wonderful, and Lila did get to paint her room purple, though she settled for one accent wall after Vivian explained that all 4 walls might be overwhelming. Evan's boxes fit neatly into Vivian's space like they'd always belonged there. The first night in their new home, they ordered pizza and ate on the floor because they couldn't find the plates. Lila declared it the best adventure ever. And Evan looked at Vivian across the chaos and saw his future. The following months were an adjustment, learning to live together, navigating the tricky balance of work and home, figuring out discipline and boundaries and how to be a family when none of them had a traditional blueprint to follow. There were hard days. Days when Lila pushed back against Vivian's authority because she wasn't her real mom. Days when Evan and Vivian argued about money or schedules or whose turn it was to handle the boring parts of life. Days when the weight of blending their lives felt like too much. But there were more good days. Mornings where they all had breakfast together before scattering to work and school. Evenings where Lila did homework at the dining table while Evan cooked and Vivian read through contracts. Weekends where they explored the city or stayed home and did nothing at all. In October, almost exactly a year after the partnership offer, Vivian proposed. They were at the river, walking after dinner, Lila running ahead chasing pigeons. Vivian stopped on a bench, pulled out a small box, and said, "I'm not good at speeches, but I'm good at knowing what I want, and I want this. You, Lila, all of it. So will you marry me?" Evan looked at the ring, simple, silver, perfect, and felt his entire world shift into place. "Yes," he said. "Absolutely yes." Lila, who had apparently been in on the plan, appeared from behind a tree with a poster that said, "We're getting married," in glitter. "You knew?" Evan asked. "Of course I knew. I helped pick the ring." Lila hugged them both. "We're a real family now." "We were always a real family," Vivian said. "This just makes it official." They told people slowly. Harrison, who was thrilled. Douglas, who sent another expensive bottle of scotch. Carl, who said it was about time. Lila told everyone at school, and suddenly Evan was getting congratulations from people he'd never met. The wedding was small, just close friends and coworkers in a garden venue with string lights and simple vows. Lila stood between them as they exchanged rings, holding both their hands, beaming like the sun. "You may kiss," the officiant said. Evan kissed his wife while their daughter cheered and thought about how far he'd come from that parking garage, how much had changed, how much he'd survived to get here. Later, at the reception, Vivian pulled him aside. "I have something for you." She handed him a small envelope. Inside was a photo. Maya, young and smiling, standing in front of a building Evan didn't recognize. "This was taken a week before she died," Vivian said quietly. "She was happy that day, excited about her research, talking about the future." She looked at Evan. "I wanted you to see her like that, not as someone who died in pain, but as someone who lived fully while she could." Evan stared at the photo, at Maya's bright eyes and wide smile, and felt something in him finally settle.
The guilt didn't disappear. It would probably never fully disappear, but it shifted, made room for something else. "Thank you," he said. "You gave her comfort when she needed it most. That's not something to feel guilty about, Evan. That's something to honor." "I'm trying. I know you are." Vivian took his hand. "And I think you're doing it, building a life that matters, showing up for the people you love. That's how we honor the people we've lost, by living well." Evan pulled her close, and they stood there watching their daughter dance with Harrison to music that was way too loud, and Evan felt for the first time in years completely at peace. Life didn't become perfect after that. Perfect wasn't real. Lila still had nightmares sometimes. Evan still had days when the weight of the past crept back in. Vivian still worked too much and forgot to eat lunch. They argued about small things and big things and learned to apologize and mean it. But they had each other. And they had built something real from the wreckage of their separate griefs. A family that didn't look like anyone else's, but worked for them. On their first anniversary, Evan woke up early and found Vivian already awake, watching the sunrise through their bedroom window. "You okay?" he asked. "More than okay. I was just thinking." "About?" "About how I almost didn't hire you. How I saw your resume and your name and thought about Maya and almost put the file in the reject pile." "Why didn't you?" "Because something told me not to. Some instinct that said this mattered." She turned to face him. "I'm glad I listened." "Me too." Lila appeared in the doorway, hair sticking up in every direction. "Are you guys being mushy again?" "Always," Vivian said. "Gross. Can we have pancakes?" "Yes, we can have pancakes." They went downstairs together, and Evan made breakfast while Lila set the table and Vivian made coffee. Simple. Ordinary. Everything he'd never thought he'd have. Later that day, they visited Maya's grave. It had become a tradition. Once a year, they went together, brought flowers, told her about their lives. "We got married," Vivian told the headstone. "And Evan's company is doing really well, and Lila's going into 4th grade next year. She's smart. You'd like her." Lila placed her flowers carefully. "I wish I could have met you," she said to the stone. "Vivian says you were nice and that you liked science like me." Evan stood back, letting them have their moment. Then he stepped forward. "I kept my promise," he said quietly. "I stayed. And I'm still here. And I'm—" His voice caught. "I'm trying to make it count. All of it." They stood there together, the three of them, honoring someone who'd died but whose impact had shaped everything that came after. On the drive home, Lila asked, "Do you think she knows? About us?" "I don't know," Vivian said honestly, "but I like to think she does. And I think she'd be happy." "Me too," Lila said. That night, after Lila was in bed, Evan and Vivian sat on their balcony watching the city lights. "Do you ever wonder what your life would have been like if that night hadn't happened?" Vivian asked. "Sometimes, but I don't think about it much anymore." "Why not?" "Because I can't change it, and because trying to imagine a different past feels like wishing away the present." Evan looked at her. "I wouldn't trade this, even knowing what it cost to get here." "That's a hard thing to say." "It's a true thing. Pain doesn't erase joy, Vivian. They exist together, and I think—" He paused, finding the words. "I think that's okay. I think we're allowed to be happy even when terrible things have happened, maybe especially then." Vivian leaned against him. "Maya used to say something similar, that the world was full of beauty and horror side by side, and you had to hold both without letting either one destroy you. She sounds like she was wise. She was. I wish you could have known her when she was alive." "Me too, but I know her through you, through the way you care about people, the way you fight for what's right. That's her legacy, and it's yours." They sat in comfortable silence, two people who'd found each other through tragedy and built something beautiful anyway. Because that was the truth that Evan had learned through all of this. Life didn't wait for you to be ready. It didn't ask permission before it broke you, but it also offered chances at healing when you least expected them. And sometimes, if you were brave enough to stay open, to let people in even when you were terrified, it gave you exactly what you needed. Not perfection, not erasure of pain, but connection, family. Love that showed up even on the hard days and said, "We're in this together." That was enough. That was everything.
And as Evan sat there with his wife beside him and his daughter asleep in the next room, he understood that healing wasn't about forgetting. It was about integrating, taking the broken pieces and building something new without pretending the cracks didn't exist. He'd held a dying woman's hand 4 years ago and carried that weight every day since. But he'd also built a company, raised a daughter, found love with someone who understood both his strength and his scars. He'd survived. And more than that, he'd learned to live again. That was the lesson, he thought. Not that tragedy could be overcome or erased, but that it could be survived. That you could carry grief and joy simultaneously. That moving forward didn't mean leaving the past behind, but rather learning to walk with it without letting it define every step. "What are you thinking about?" Vivian asked. "That I'm lucky. That we're lucky." "We are." "And that I love you, in case I haven't said it enough today. You can never say it enough." She kissed him softly. "I love you too." They went inside, checked on Lila one more time, and went to bed in the home they'd built together. And Evan slept peacefully, knowing that tomorrow would bring its own challenges and joys, and that whatever came, he wouldn't face it alone. That was what mattered. That was what made everything worth it. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of people who stayed.